Hello everybody, and welcome to this video where I want to go through some of my favorite things in Visual Studio 2022. My name is Kristensen and I work on Visual Studio, and I have for the past 12 years. And I just want to share some of my favorite things because I think that there's something here that you might not be aware of that will make you more productive and more happy as a developer. I want to go through a bunch of new features, some updates, some tweaks to existing features that kind of just makes it all feel a lot better to be a developer when we're using Visual Studio. But before we dive in, where I want to begin is with the new kind of reality in the way we work, right? A lot of people have gone back to the offices, but a lot of people have not. And then there are people that are sometimes in the office and sometimes at home. And when we have environments like this, we tend to move between different screen resolutions and different monitor setups. So for instance, even when I'm at home, sometimes I take my laptop out of the docking station here and I sit in the couch and I do a little work from there. In that situation, I just have a small little screen. But when I'm up at my desk like I am here, I have one of these ultra wide monitors. So that's a completely different layout, right? And when I go to the office, I might have multi-monitors. And so I want to make sure that no matter where I am, where I'm plugged in, what screen setup I've got, Visual Studio is always in an optimal condition to allow me to do my best work. And so let's take a look at some of the cool things that we can do with that. So here I have Visual Studio, and I have my various different windows like the toolbox, and I have the Solution Explorer out on the right side here. And this works well for this particular monitor with this resolution that I'm using right now. When I'm sitting with my laptop, I want more of a kind of a minimal layout like this. So in this situation, I have a small screen, so I don't want all these tool windows to show up. I need that extra space to code. And I actually also have a kind of a separate thing is when I work on extensions, I like my layout to be a little bit different. So I write extensions for Visual Studio, and when I do that, I always want like the arrow list to be visible like you see here, and I show a third tool window over here by the Solution Explorer. But that's only relevant for when I do that. If I work with websites, I might have other requirements, different tool windows like the Task Runner Explorer or other things that I want to have shown that I otherwise don't need. And then when I'm at my ultra wide, I really like to spread out horizontally over that big area. And so it will look something like this. Now this doesn't look very good on this monitor and this screen resolution that I'm using right here. But maybe you can get the idea how I can like spread out horizontally. Let's go back here. So let's say you have dual monitors. You could actually take the different tool windows in Visual Studio and spread out on these various different monitors. So I don't have that here for this video, so we'll have to pretend. So let's open a window here, a tool window, the Test Explorer. And let's imagine that I take this and I drag that onto my secondary monitor, okay? And maybe I'll make it full screen or make it really big so I can easily see all my unit tests. All I have to do to save that Windows layout so I can easily come back and forth to it is to go to Window and say Save Window Layout. And then we give it a name. Let's call it Testing. And that's it. So now I've saved this layout. If I go back up to Window, you can see that I have all of my saved Windows layouts right here, and I can apply any of them. For instance, we can go to this one and then back to the one we just created, Testing. And I can do that with keyboard shortcuts to make that very, very easy and fast. So this is super helpful. I use this every day, all the time, as I move between different development scenarios but also different monitor setups. So I can't recommend this high enough. Go check that out. It was a feature we were introducing in 2019, Visual Studio 2019, and we've been improving it as time has gone by. So super lifesaver for this new world and new situation with dual monitors and multi-monitors for different locations. All right. So here's another thing. I have my code base here. I got a bunch of files open, but I can't really see how many files do I have open, and I don't really know. I can only see whatever my screen resolution allows me to see, how wide the screen is, and that's why we always have had this little thing up here. You can click next to the tabs, and if you click that now, notice how you can see all the list of open files. There are some that are grayed out and italics. Those are the ones that are not visible right now. And then we have the ones that just look kind of normal. Those are the ones you see on the screen. And the one in bold is the one that's currently active. So that makes it really easy for me to get a picture of what's open and where can I find things. But, sometimes I kind of just want to see everything all the time, all the open documents. So if I go to the settings icon, I can now say show tabs in multiple rows. And what's really nice here is that if you have the screen real estate, if you have the vertical space, you can now stack all these tabs so you can see everything that's open. Very, very handy. But there are some monitors that are, that are extra wide, for instance. And in those, it would be kind of nice if we can take our tabs and instead of having them on top, then move them to the side where we have more space. So again, going to the settings and click on place tabs on the left. So it's really nice. I can resize this to whatever I want to make it fit exactly my monitor here, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm getting that extra vertical space. I can now see maybe a couple lines more of code in the editor because I moved the tabs to the side. But let's see what else we can do here. Because I have all these open documents, and you can see by default, it's actually kind of nice. They are sorted by the project they belong to. So my solution have multiple projects, and they're all listed under each of those projects. That's very nice. I don't have to sort that, group by project. I don't have to do any grouping at all, but I really like that. So now it's just alphabetically sorted, but I want it to be group by project like here. And if we take it one step further here, what if we colorize these documents per project? So now each tab has the same color if it belongs to the same project. And that makes it even easier for me to kind of at a glance see where these files belong. If we don't want it per project, because I already group my tabs per project here, we could do it by file extension. So that's also very handy. So I can see all my Razor files, all my C# files, all my JavaScript files. They all have a separate color, so it makes it easier for me to get that overview. And that might be exactly what you'd like to do here. And as a new thing, we can also go in and say, let's do it by regular expression. And let's configure the regular expressions. So it's a file here that opens up, and I can start typing. So I'm just gonna copy that line up from above, and let's say we want to do CSS. And as soon as I save the file, we can see the CSS files now got updated with a color. We have Razor. We want to have something specific here, and we can even take it further. We can say, everything that contains the word, category, let's say. So like something like this. So now everything that has the word or CATEG will be colorized. So you can do that by folder, you can do that by file name and all these things. So you can really customize how you colorize these tabs. It's pretty phenomenal. And of course, if you move back up and use the tabs on the top, they maintain their colors. So that's really, really nice. So let's go back to per project. I kind of like to do per project when I have the tabs up top. And that, because in this case, they're not grouped by project. And so having them colorized by project is my preference. Yours might be different, but I really enjoy this. So colors can be very, very helpful to us when it helps us kind of identify the different files and so on. But there's another thing where I feel the color is a big deal. And it has to do with us sitting in Visual Studio, using Visual Studio for, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day sometimes, 5 days a week, right? This is home away from home. And just like you do with your regular home, you want to have a certain furniture you put in your house, right? You have what colors do you want your walls and so on. You want to make it yours. You want to make it feel like a place where you're comfortable. And Visual Studio is no different. So what's really cool now in Visual Studio 2022 is that we have made it such that you can take any Visual Studio Code, a VS Code color theme, and convert that to a Visual Studio color theme very easily. And there's a bunch of these available out on the extension marketplace, and I want to just show you a few right here. So go to Tools, Theme, and you can choose from any of the themes that you've got installed. Of course, you get some out of the box with Visual Studio you can choose from. And you can always go ahead and say click for Get More Themes, and that will get you to the marketplace where you can install all these different themes. And they're fantastic. There's so many great ones in here, and they really help us if we want a nice dark theme, if we're sitting in a dark room, for instance. And we can even have Visual Studio change the theme automatically when Windows changes its theme. There's this thing here called Use System Setting. And when we do that, if Windows is running in a dark theme at night, for instance, after sunset, Visual Studio will automatically switch to the dark theme at that point in time, and back to the light theme at sunrise, if that's your Windows settings, right? So that's really, really cool. So a whole lot of colors that makes our lives better in Visual Studio 2022. But let's change that back to the blue theme for now. And I'm going to change to a different project here. So here's just a very simple .NET console app. And I want to show you some cool things and improvements we've done to the AI-based coding assistant in Visual Studio. So I'm going to type a new line here. And notice how Visual Studio automatically will suggest that I put in a last name, which is exactly what I want in this case. I want the last name property to be inserted for me right here. I also want the full name. So let's hit enter again. And this time it suggests age, which could be the accurate one, but I want full name. So I'm just going to pretend it's not showing me anything and just start typing public string full name. And notice here, I can just hit tab and I get my full name. And it understands that full name is a product of first name and last name. This is really, really fantastic. So the AI engine here in Visual Studio understands the context I'm in. It understands that I'm right under the first name property. Chances are that I might want another property is relatively big. And based on the name, it also then, first name, it then also suggests that, hey, last name is usually what other people will add when they, as the next logical property. But what I was really impressed by was the full name, that it understands what a full name is. Right? It understands that when people have a first name and a last name and they need a full name, this is what they want. Absolutely fantastic here. Let's scroll down and you can see here I have a method here called remove data. And all it does, it removes some data from the list that I have defined above it. So what's missing here is a method for adding data. So again, I'm going to hit enter, and Visual Studio already knows what I'm going to do here. I'm going to create an add data method. So notice that based on the name, remove data, it understands what remove means and add. And so it suggests that I created a method called add. But what was crazy was that it knew what that would do inside the method, right? So it knew that it should not take the list and remove something. It should add to that list. So this is just absolutely fantastic here. I'm just coding by tapping enter and hitting the tab key here. It's absolutely great. And we can take it a step further. So let's say that I want to create a new method, or I want some code, but I'm not entirely sure how I should write it. What I can do is that I can express it in a code comment like this one. So here I have a comment. It says, take the two arguments and add them together. So the args refers to the args that come into the main method up here. So I'm just writing here in plain English what it is that I would like to have happen. And now I can hit enter. And Visual Studio will automatically suggest what that code might look like. So it understands what I'm saying in English in the code comment and can translate that into something that might be what I want. So this is absolutely fantastic. So this is the AI engine that is built upon a huge data set, and using machine learning, it's able to take the context that the AI engine is aware of and pair that up with the big machine learning model of what do people do in situations like this. That's basically what the machine learning model knows. And when we pair those up together, Visual Studio can do amazing things like this. So a big step forward for the AI engine here in Visual Studio 2022. Now let's call our new method here the add data. Add data, and we're just gonna give it some string. What are we gonna call it? We're gonna call it just 1 here, and I'm gonna just duplicate the line. Control D duplicates the line like this, and then we can. I'm using an extension here called Shifter that lets me change integers and other things by keyboard shortcut here, Control Alt up and down, and so now I can fill my list here with data. Now let's set a breakpoint, and I'm going to set a specific type of breakpoint. This is a new type of breakpoint, a temporary breakpoint. So what's really nice about a temporary breakpoint is that it disappears as soon as the debugger hits the breakpoint. So let's run this console app. So here it runs. And it comes down here. And you see the breakpoint is now gone. Right? The breakpoint is gone because it was temporary. It only hits once. Yeah, so let's stop debugging here and let's scroll up. So here on line 18, I'm making a method call into a NuGet package called newtonsoft.json. And I don't really know what's going on inside the method called serializeObject. I might be able to find the source code somewhere on GitHub and then go figure it out. But it would be really nice if there's a way for me to just go straight to the definition, hit F12, and go to definition. So let's try that. And it takes me straight to the source. So this is not disassembly or anything like that. This is the actual source code using something called source link. All NuGet packages can opt into source link, and that will allow Visual Studio to understand how to get to the actual source code that made up this particular version of this NuGet package. And even when you're inside these files, you can keep hitting F12, go to definition, until we come down here, and it's a serializeObject internal. And this is a private string. So I'm F12ing, I'm going to definition through a file that made up the NuGet package that I'm working on, and I can see everything that's happening. Super helpful. All right, I want to switch over to a different project, and I'm going to open it here. It's the one I had opened just before. Notice how when I open it up here, all the files that were open before are now open again. And in my Solution Explorer, I can see that all my folders and projects have all been expanded to the same levels that they were last time I used this project. And that's all good. That means that I can get right back into where I left off. But very often, this is not what I want. Very often I come in, I open the project in the morning to start working on something, and I don't want sort of yesterday's state to be expanded into Visual Studio here. I want something clean. I want something fresh. I want that fresh car smell in the morning, right? I come in, I just want none of this open, but I want to be able to open my app and work with it. So I'm going to show you a couple of settings that are really, really helpful. So if you go to Tools, Options, and then go to Projects and Solutions, there are two checkboxes that are really good to uncheck here. If you're someone like me that likes that fresh car smell. So Reopen Documents on Solution Load. I'm going to uncheck that. And Restore Solution Explorer Project Hierarchy State on Solution Load. I'm going to uncheck that as well. So now let's go back to the previous console app here. We can see that the document was not open, and the demo console project over here is collapsed. It's not expanded. So now let's open this project again that we had before. I'm going to switch again. And first of all, I don't know if you noticed this, but it's instant. The loading of these projects are now instant because no other files have to be opened. No state had to be read from disk and hydrated into memory and applied on the UI thread in Visual Studio to expand all the tree nodes in Solution Explorer. None of that was necessary. When you open a file, let's say you open a C# file. If it's the first time you open a C# file in that instance of Visual Studio that you've got open, then it has to boot up all of Roslyn and everything to get IntelliSense and colorization and all of that working. And that's called a language service. And a language service can sometimes take a little while to load. Now, it's not necessarily a long time, but it's not instant like it is if we don't need it, and we do like I do here. So this is my default. This is what I always do. Just a little performance trick if you like the fresh car smell. All right, I'm going to show you one of my favorite new features that we are putting into Visual Studio. This one started its life as an extension, and is now coming into Visual Studio. So let me demonstrate that. So let's say I want to add a file to my project. I can right click, go down to Add a New Item, and that gives me this dialog. But what if I go into Tools, Options here and click a preview feature flag here. And what I want to search for is here, enable quick add. Okay. So now when I right click and say add new item, or kick Control Shift A, is the same thing. I get this little dialog up instead. So I can still click on this link that's shown as well that says show all templates, which gives me that experience that I'm used to. But I want to get the simplified view. We call it the quick add dialog. And so in here, I can just type a file name. So name.cs. And that's what it does. It just gives me the internal class. And this actually respects if I have how my namespace rules are in my editor config or in my settings, and it will do the right thing. It uses the templates behind the scenes. But it's a little bit more clever than that. So Control Shift A again for add new item to bring it back up. Let's type something a little bit more interesting. What if we create two files? What if I create a client CS and iClient.cs? Now let's try that. I just comma separated them, and I now have those two files. But check this out. iClient is an interface, whereas client is a class. So the quick add method or dialog is able to understand that iClient, that pattern, naming pattern, should match an interface template and then give me that. So that's really, really handy. But I can also create folders. So I'm going to create a folder here called folder, and you can name it whatever you want and just end it with a /. Hit enter, and now you have an empty folder. I could also have gone in and said, okay, let's do, what if I do some subdirectories here and then end with a file.css. So I can create subfolders, I can create files in those folders. Again, I can comma separate these to create multiples. Really, really handy to have all this working. So this is in the preview behind a feature flag. So you saw how I went into tools options under preview features and enabled this feature. So I can't recommend this highly enough. I love this thing. I used the extension and for years, and I'm very happy that this is now in the box. So now that we have a CSS file open, let's write some CSS. Let's do background. Oh, let's do blue, and let's do set index. 3, 4, something. All right. So I'm going to show you an extension here called Shifter. It allows me to flip between values in the editor really, really easily. Let me demonstrate. So I have a keyboard shortcut here, Control-Alt, and then either the up arrow or down arrow. And so if I'm on a number here, like the Z index, and hit up, Control-Alt up, it increments the number like this. If it was a, let's say 0.08 here, you see it will know to keep those values depending on the decimals and all this sort of stuff. So really, really handy if you just need to like increment by 1 or something like that. But we can do more. It doesn't have to be just numbers. It could also be colors. So here's the color blue. So if I do Control-Alt up, I get royal blue, Dodger blue. You see here, it gets lighter and lighter. The color gets lighter and lighter and lighter, and then it gets darker if I go down. Dark blue, and so on and so forth. So I can flip through these very easily. I can do the same if we have a, let's see here. Let's grab a color here with the color picker, that color right there. So if I have a hex value like this, I can do the same. And it understands what hex is, and it knows it's a color in this case, and so it will make the color darker or lighter as I either go up or down with the keyboard shortcuts. So I'm just going to write some invalid CSS here. We can do other things like switch between true and false, or yes and no, or on, off, and so on and so forth, right? So every time we can toggle between kind of known values, Shifter comes in and makes that super easy for us. Control-Alt up and down. So let me pin the output window here. Let me build our project. Now notice what's going on down here in the output window. I'm getting a very nice colorized output here because I'm using an extension that colorizes everything, which is really nice. Something is green or grayed means that it's fine. There's no problem. But let's introduce a syntax error. Let's delete this semicolon and run again. So now, yeah, we get an error in the error list, but we also see that our output is now red because there was an error. So it makes the output window really, really easy to kind of just glance over or skim, and you can see if you have anything red or anything orange, if it's like a warning. And that's just really, really helpful. So there's a bunch of these extensions out there that you can use. The one I use is called VSColorOutput. VSColorOutput. So go check that out. a really, really handy thing to have. And the last extension I want to show you, let's make this compile again, is one called Solution Colors. So you may have the issue where you have multiple instances of Visual Studio open. And how can you tell them apart? They all look the same. What if it's the same repo you have open in both, but different branches? Now they look almost identical. The solution names are the same. All the files in Solution Explorer are the same. How do you tell the difference between open instances of Visual Studio? Well, what we can do with Solution Color is that we can right-click the solution and set a color. So I can give it any color I want, or I can enable auto mode. So auto mode basically takes the solution path and the branch name and other things and makes like a unique color that it will always map to that same color. So if I now open another Visual Studio here, we can see here it will apply a color as the solution is loaded. See, this one turns blue. You can see the blue color up here, and the other one got the magenta color or pink right up there. Now I can go in here and go to options and make it a little bit more visible. I can go and say, instead of just colorizing up here, up there, and it also puts a line at the bottom of the screen, you know, maybe I want a little bit extra. Maybe I want it on the, let's see here, let's look at the borders. Instead of just the bottom, what if I wanted it at the top as well? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so now I have a thing here at the top. This is very, very cool because now I can very, very easily see that this is the, you know, I have a magenta one, I have a blue one, and so on. And I can even tell by hovering down in the taskbar, those colors are also present here under each of the thumbnails in the Windows taskbar. Yeah. And if I don't like magenta, I don't have to have the, even though we have auto mode is on, I can always say, no, I want, you know, give me burgundy. And I can keep that color. And all other solutions will still have the automatic one, except for the ones that I manually said, hey, no, I want to specify the exact color for this particular solution. And of course, I can also hit the custom one and then select any color, you know, RGB color that I can find here. So, or that exists rather. So you can be really, really specific here, and it stores it in the .vs folder at the solution root. So it's not something you want to check into source control. You can, but it's not by default. So this is just a personal setting to you. Having put colors on yours does not change the colors that your team members might have chosen for theirs, or if they don't want any colors, that doesn't make any difference either, because they're kind of just local to your machine. So this is called Solution Colors. Solution Colors. So throughout this whole demo, you probably didn't notice, because there's no way to tell, that I've been working inside a VM. But not just any VM or virtual machine. I've been working inside a dev box, a Microsoft dev box. And as you can tell, there's really no way to tell. This is just Visual Studio running. It can run with any other app that I have installed, that I need to have installed to make me able to work on the project I'm working on, right? So it's just another VM, but it's hosted in the cloud and it's super powerful. So if I go to devbox.microsoft.com, this is where I have access to my dev boxes. And this is where my IT department has given me the opportunity to create new dev boxes that I can connect to. So I have two here. I got Legacy and I got Podcast. Those are two, and they're pretty powerful. 8 core, 32 gigs of RAM, and a terabyte of SSD, very fast SSD drives. So depending on your workload, you may want to have a super fast, powerful machine, or if you have a lighter workload, you can go sort of smaller. And it's very easy to create a new one. So anyone can just come in here and say, hey, I want to start on a new project. I want a clean machine. And you just set it up very, very easily from this website. So it's a very, very cool technology. It makes sure that your Windows is always up to date and the latest patches. It's kind of a managed thing. Your IT department can manage all these dev boxes the way they can also manage your own, physical workstation or laptops. To always keep them secure, compliant, up to date. Connect them back to your network. Have all those things so that you won't even notice that you're on a VM. And the first time I tried this, I will admit I was a little bit skeptical. But I signed in for the first time. And OneDrive started synchronizing my files. So all of a sudden I had all my files. Everything was there. All the images and all these different things that I have on my desktop and in my documents and whatnot, it was all there. And the image came pre-installed with Visual Studio and a bunch of other tools that I needed. So I could just get to work immediately. And it really didn't feel like it was like a VM that was hosted in the cloud or anything like that. It felt just like another one of my machines. And I'm very excited for this. I have a specific use case, which is, Visual Studio sometimes can use a lot of resources when you compile all the time and run debug and all that sort of stuff. It takes a lot of resources. We want it to take a lot of resources, right? We want it to compile as fast as possible. We don't want to sit and wait. So we wanted to be able to use all the resources that we've got. Now, the problem with that is that for me, I have a laptop and it kind of drains the battery. So I can't use Visual Studio on battery on my laptop for very long. But with DevBox, I can. I can go all day long because I don't do any of that heavy lifting locally on my laptop. It all takes place in the cloud with much beefier hardware than what I've got in my laptop. So I get a much faster experience and I get battery that lasts all day. It's perfect. So it's a public preview. You can go ahead and try it out. I encourage you to do that. I think it would be fantastic. And there's a whole admin story for your IT admin. You may want to talk to them about it as well, because there's a whole opportunity for them to make this secure and compliant and all this sort of stuff, making sure that you don't spin anything up that they don't think you should. It's a win-win. It's a win for the developer and it's a win for IT. You really get that flexibility, that productivity, and get all the hardware you need when you need it. So go check out DevBox, Microsoft DevBox. And that was it for this brief video of me going through some of my favorite features in Visual Studio 2022. New features are added all the time, so make sure you go check it out, install the latest version, and try it out for yourself. Thank you.